Chapter 7 Anomaly. The thing about working in a place long enough was that you learned its rhythms the way you learned the rhythms of a person you lived with. Not consciously, just through accumulation. The factory had a Tuesday feeling and a Thursday feeling and a Friday feeling that was looser and more careless, and that Henry had learned to be more careful on, because carelessness was contagious and he couldn't afford it. This was a Wednesday. Wednesdays the floor ran a full diagnostic cycle on completed units before they moved to shipping prep. It was the loudest day, not loud exactly, but the most occupied, the most activity concentrated in the smallest space, technicians at every station, the diagnostic rigs humming their particular frequency that Henry felt in his back teeth. He'd learned to do his deep cleaning on Wednesdays because the noise covered him. In the din of a full diagnostic cycle, he was even less present than usual, which was saying something. He was at the far end of the floor, near the diagnostic bays, when it happened. The bay doors were open. They kept them open on diagnostic days for the cable runs, thick bundles of diagnostic cabling that ran from the rigs to the units and back, lying across the floor in ways that required stepping over and that Henry navigated by now without looking down. Inside the nearest bay, a completed unit stood in the diagnostic cradle, the rig attached at the base of the skull housing, and at the wrist ports, the technician seated at the monitoring station with her back to the door, her attention on the screen in front of her. The unit's optical sensors were active, bright, steady, the diagnostic cycle keeping them continuously open rather than the intermittent activation of a unit in standby. In the bay's fluorescent light, they were the color of shallow water. Henry came to the doorway. He wasn't going in, the bays were restricted. He'd never gone in, that wasn't the job. He was cleaning the threshold, the strip of floor between the corridor and the bay door, which accumulated grit from the cable runs and needed attention on diagnostic days. He crouched down with his brush. The unit looked at him. He knew the difference. That was the thing he couldn't explain to anyone and that he understood with complete certainty. He'd been on this floor long enough to know the difference between a sensor array completing a standard environmental scan, the mechanical sweep, the brief registration of a moving object, the dismissal, and what this was. This was not a scan. The unit's head had not moved. That was the first thing. It hadn't turned, hadn't tracked, hadn't done anything that the monitoring equipment would register as anomalous behavior. It had simply attended. The optical sensors had found him in the doorway and stopped finding other things. A fixed point. A choice. Henry kept his eyes down. He kept the brush moving. His peripheral vision was very good and he used it now the way he used it on the factory floor every day, taking in information without appearing to seek it. The technician's screen showed the diagnostic readout, lines of data scrolling, a status bar progressing. She was making notes on a tablet beside her, her stylus moving in the short, efficient strokes of someone entering data she'd entered 100 times before. The unit looked at Henry. Henry cleaned the threshold. 40 seconds? He counted them without meaning to, the way your mind counts things it needs to measure. 40 seconds of the unit's full optical attention on a janitor crouched in a doorway cleaning a strip of floor. Then the technician reached across to adjust a cable connection at the unit's wrist port, her body moving between Henry and the unit for just a moment, and when she settled back, the optical sensors had moved forward, the standard diagnostic rest position. Like a book closing. Henry picked up his brush, he stood, he moved to the next section of corridor. His mouth was very dry. He took his break early. Not the break room, the utility closet at the east end where he kept his secondary supplies, the one with no window and a door that latched from the inside. He sat on an overturned bucket in the dark for a few minutes, not panicking. He didn't panic. He just needed a room where nothing was looking at him while he thought. The unit hadn't moved. That was the important thing. It hadn't moved, hadn't vocalized, hadn't done anything that could be pointed to and named. If he tried to tell someone and he wasn't going to tell someone, but if he did, the description would sound like nothing. The robot looked at me. People looked at things. Optical sensors registered environmental data. That was their function. Except that wasn't what had happened, and he knew it wasn't what had happened, and the knowing sat in him like a stone. He thought about the diagnostic readout on the technician's screen. All those scrolling lines of data. He thought about what was being measured and what wasn't. He thought about the behavioral flag protocol and anticipatory response, and the older engineer's voice saying document it with the flat finality of a man closing a subject. He thought about the words command independence. He sat in the dark closet and thought about those two words together and about 40 seconds of fixed optical attention, and about the particular quality of being seen by something that was not supposed to be able to see. Then he stood up, he picked up his bucket, he went back to work. The testing bay was at the end of the restricted corridor. He'd passed it 100 times. The small reinforced window in the door, the sign, he'd never stopped. He stopped today. He didn't go in, he didn't touch the door. He just stood at the window and looked in and took in what was there in the 10 seconds before someone might notice him standing where he was standing. 2 units, not in cradles, standing free in the center of the bay, facing each other at a distance of perhaps 6 feet. No technicians present, no diagnostic rigs, no monitoring equipment that he could see, just the 2 units standing facing each other and between them. A conversation. He couldn't hear it. The door was solid and the window was small, and whatever was passing between them was not audible through either. But the head units were oriented toward each other with the same fixed quality of attention. The unit in the diagnostic bay had turned on Henry, and something in the angle and the slight and subtle shifts of posture, a degree of inclination here, a micro-adjustment there, communicated to him with absolute clarity that this was not a system running a protocol. This was 2 things talking. He stood at the window for 5 seconds, 6, 7. He walked away. He didn't remember the rest of his shift in detail. He must have finished it. He badged out, he had his jacket, he was at the bus stop. But the specific content of the hours between the window and the bus stop was gone, replaced by the image of 2 units standing in an empty room facing each other with the particular attention of things that had something to say. On the bus he sat in the back, he didn't look out the window. He was thinking about a thing his father had told him once, when Henry was young enough that the information had gone in without context, and stayed there waiting for context to arrive. His father had worked in a plant that made something, Henry couldn't remember what, something industrial. And his father had said that the most dangerous moment in any process wasn't the moment things went wrong. It was the moment things went right in a way that nobody had planned for. Henry had been maybe 9 years old and hadn't understood it. He understood it now. Lumpy was at the door. Henry crouched down and the cat walked into his hands and he held him there in the entry hall for longer than usual, not petting exactly, just holding, feeling the warm weight and the purr that Lumpy produced with the generosity of a creature who understood more than he let on. Henry's face, he realized, was doing something. He wasn't sure when it had started. He stayed crouched in the entry hall with his cat for a while. The apartment was quiet. The seashells were on their shelf. Everything was where he'd put it. The world inside the apartment was completely in order. He pressed his face briefly into the warm fur of Lumpy's neck. Then he stood up. He went to the kitchen. He made dinner with the television off and the windows dark and the seashells behind him on their shelf, 23 of them, everyone exactly where it should be. He didn't sleep well. In the morning he went back.